A pleasure to meet all at last. And so, for films I should have talked about years ago, in this particular instance, I'm pretty happy to say, or at least I could say, that this next film that I have managed to watch is a bit different than what we've seen from many others over the years. More so, for those of you who are familiar with Will Ferrell, one of his biggest performances ever was as Buddy the Elf in 2003. And in the next decade or so, he managed to snag a lot of roles. Such other notable picks that occurred throughout the years included Step Brothers, Talladega Nights, The Anchorman, Legend of Ron Burgundy, as well as its sequel, and who could forget Land of the Lost. But I might as well just say that this film from 2011, Everything Must Go, is a lot different than what we've normally seen from Will Ferrell. He's known to be the funny type in accordance with comedy and such, but this one, because it focuses more on the likes of drama, especially in accordance with the kind of cliche known as rock bottom. This is, of course, a short story that was made that has since been adapted into a not great film for what it is, but I especially do like it for how different it is in allowing for Will Ferrell to be more flexible. Because much like Robin Williams and many other comedians, anyone who specializes in making people laugh for fun, we can just go on ahead and say that Will Ferrell definitely needed to step outside of his comfort zone every now and then and try something new every now and then. In this instance, with director Dan Rush going through, as well as the likes of this Raymond Carver short story being adapted into a full-length feature film, it centers on a salesperson known by the name of Nick. And Nick, in this instance, had given 16 years to a certain company that of which he unfortunately would be fired from. Whatever the circumstances were, some people would assume it's because of his drinking habits, because as we'll see throughout the rest of the film, he unfortunately has a bit of a drinking problem, with a lot of Pabst Blue Ribbons even inside of a small mini fridge. But in parting ways with his company, especially with his boss, he is given a final gift in the form of a Swiss Army knife. Now, this Swiss Army knife is used for pretty malevolent purposes, in the form of sticking it into a tire, and eventually running through with some miners whom are hoping to get some drinks from him. But even after he makes it back home, he's still not quite at the end of the line just yet. Because if he's having a bad day, surely it would get better. But in this film, it proves to be very different. Nick unfortunately finds a lot of stuff on the lawn. Most of it was his. And he's got a lot of stuff. I mean, he's got some books, he's got a sword collection, he's got a bunch of antiques, he's got a ton of other things, some furniture. And on top of that, the house is locked, his wife is not answering his calls, and as time goes on where he's unable to enter his own house, he can't even get a hold of money from the bank because he and his wife had made an agreement to take on money. And because his wife's not with him, that of course means for some reason he can't even get cash. Eventually, the phone line gives way, as in he's no longer able to make any calls to his wife. There's eventually a repo guy that comes around and repossesses the car, and if it's not already bad enough, he's basically on the recliner on his lawn getting hit by the sprinkler system that goes on in the morning, and eventually the cops show up one day. So, even after all that's said and done, with the so-called optimism and hope that things would eventually change, he's now officially in such a bad position. Drinking his own beer on his own lawn. I tell you, that quote alone is probably the one thing I remember best from this movie. You told me I can't drink a beer on my own lawn. I swear, I wanted to laugh at that really badly. It's probably the only comedic relief that we have from this whole film, because throughout the rest of the time, what we have here is Detective Garcia, played by Michael Pena, and while he and Will Ferrell are probably the biggest notable actors of the film, there are still a few others worth noting. Some of the Others that we have will include Rebecca Hall, Laura Dern, Glenn Howerton, Stephen Root, Argus McCallum, Todd Bryant, and there of course is also a young assistant played by CJ Wallace, known as Kenny Loftus. He of course is around in the neighborhood as well, and Nick offers him a job to help sell some things at a yard sale that he's putting up. Because Detective Garcia is told ahead of time he's not abandoning his stuff. That's a lot of things on the lawn that he could possibly just simply remove. And the only way he knows how is through a big yard sale. A lot of these things that he has gotten a hold of over the years, through his marriage, through his life with his job, and through everything else that he had done so far, he definitely turned a corner into a pretty dark place. Some might believe that it's because of the drinking habits he's had with all the Pabst Blue Ribbons he's had. Some might think of it because of his laziness. Some might think of it because of his over-reliance on his wife needing to make connections with him. So I guess you could say that the housewife has had enough by this point. After many years of ups and downs, while it's not explicitly clear what exactly is going on, and more importantly, what exactly happened leading up to him getting fired and leading up to all this stuff that's now transpiring because his wife refuses to make contact with him on the phone or in person. An undisclosed location that she could be hiding anywhere, and you would think that he'd be able to find her using tracking or whatnot on phones, which pretty much was around at that time. But of course, time does pass, money is made, and the yard sale itself does prove to be a bit of a success. Nick was only given a few days to make it work, and even though it does a pretty good job, the time eventually does come. But even though Nick does have good meanings with Detective Garcia, there eventually comes around a point in which that Nick is brought into Garcia's office, and Nick happens to find an answering machine, which apparently highlights a big clue. A clue about what's going on with his wife. It turns out there's an affair. Somehow, some way, Detective Garcia is apparently being tracked on and stepped on by Nick's own wife. Quite the affair, if you ask me. A fight ends up breaking out. But even when it's all over, not much can be done here. It's truly up in the air when you think about it. And even by the end of the film, after all the things that had happened, and after all that Nick himself had been through, there definitely is no Hollywood ending to this part here. And on top of that, what exactly is going on with Mrs. Halsey herself, nobody really knows. But it does seem that she does have a relationship with Garcia himself. And with all of that covered, and it does seem that Samantha, played by Rebecca Hall, might just be Nick's best bet at a relationship and possibly a way of redemption. Climbing out of rock bottom certainly wasn't an easy feat, but running out of beer, having to make money by selling prized possessions of his, and basically just not having much of a home to live in other than on his own lawn and such, in a recliner. There just certainly isn't very much that you can take away here, but this is certainly one of a kind. A film like this, you don't get very much of. These kinds of drama films, they don't exactly give much of an insight, but they also aren't exactly the best in terms of catching one's attention. Mainly because it's something that most people try to avoid, but in this certain context, it is actually a good idea to remind ourselves on the fact that there could very much be one day in which we'll lose our possessions, we'll lose all our money, we'll lose our job, we'll lose our relationship and our career, our own homestead, and pretty much anything else until there's nothing left. Basically, it's the point at which that a survival situation envelops. And you just have to think for yourself. The kind of psychological effects that some people can be worked with, the kind of after effects that one can have even after recuperating from this sort of phenomenon. And moreover, what can you possibly do to teach a next generation of people what exactly is the consequence of certain actions that can in fact lead all the way down to the bottom, by which it can be hard to climb back out of, sometimes even without a little bit of assistance. Nick pretty much had to have his act cleaned up. Some really would think that the drinking had something to do with it. So I feel like in this instance, this kind of film is something that not too many people would recommend, but I overall will certainly give it a good scoring. 8.5 out of 10.1. And with all that in mind, this is a pretty good drama film. And there's probably others out there that I can talk about, but even after 15 years, one like this, I'm sure we'll see more of this sort. But still, a decade and a half later, it still does a lot of wonders to inspire and eventually allow people to realize it might be bottom of the barrel one day, but another day, there just might be a ray of hope waiting in the wings for you. So I guess that pretty much covers it for this piece. And if you want to see more, go down to my channel. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.